We'd like to invite all of the folks that have been a part of the Thriving by Design network and the work that has put this One Minnesota Equity Blueprint together to be with us up here. So those of you who are sitting out in the audience, I see Sean and Tara and others, Jerome, Mateo.
Need to make room for the reporters.
Anyway. Make room for the reporters, yeah. No.
Who are coming later. Some of them are coming from another event.
And this someone check, can you guys hear us in the back? You guys good?
You can hear my soft voice? Okay, great. Okay, wow.
Oh, it happens.
It happens.
We need to
Scoot in.
You could get a little closer here.
Why don't you move this way, and then move this way. Okay. Well, again, good morning. I'm Jane Leonard. I am the President of Growth and Justice and co-host of this press conference with our project partner, oneminnesota.org, and Brett Buckner is here. And one of the many members statewide, many of whom are standing behind me and beside me, of the Thriving by Design network. And all of us help create the One Minnesota Equity Blueprint and the legislative priorities that we will be talking about today. I'm a Minnesota native with 1 foot in rural, our farm in Isle Harbor Township, and 1 foot in urban, my home in St. Paul. I've spent a lifetime working in community, rural, and economic development because community is the crucible for change. Our Minnesota community is at a crossroads. If we embrace diverse, inclusive, and equitable community, each of us belonging to and working to help our shared home, we can build together a future where every Minnesotan, regardless of race, geography, gender, has the opportunity to succeed and to share their success. And we need all of us in for all of us to succeed. It's a simple math problem to solve for economic growth and a moral imperative for economic and environmental justice. 3 key themes distinguish this initial set of legislative priorities that we will be discussing here this morning, and our ultimate One Minnesota Equity Blueprint, which will be rolled out over time. A persistent concern and focus on rural and urban interdependence, a high priority on racial equity and other aspects of social justice, and a stronger integration of climate action with equity in all aspects of policymaking. In the coming months, as I said, we will elaborate and expand on these initial priorities with a phased rollout of the more detailed and comprehensive One Minnesota Equity Blueprint. This document will describe our long-term vision and serve as a guidebook over the next decade for policies and practices that people, businesses, communities, and governments can implement to achieve a more equitable Minnesota. And now I'd like to turn to Brett, my friend, my colleague, and managing director of oneminnesota.org for a few remarks. Brett.
Thank you. Thanks, guys. Again, my name is Brett Buckner. I am the managing director for onemn.org, a equity think tank that has brought together many organizations across the metropolitan area. I'd like to point out, say hi to one of our board members here, Mr. Ezell Jones, and to one of our founders, Bruce Corey, who has now become, as we call it, the man now, who is now working for government. And it shows you that when we put our ideas together and put our best efforts together, we can absolutely start to make change in our society. I'm happy to be a part of this collaboration that has been going on off of the basic, reach out to say a year. And we came up with this crazy idea that we actually can create a very strong and connected Minnesota. That one Minnesota is made up when all are working together. Again, oneminnesota.org has been around for 17 years. We have been working for this idea for that long, and we are excited to see this come to this end. And we're excited to see the governor and others taking a lead to make sure that we are truly making sure that each and every Minnesotan is truly ready to go. Won't belabor the point too much. Again, we are here to really start to roll out and start to have a conversation with Minnesotans, as we have actually had over the past summer. From Granite Falls to Hinckley and all in between. We are really excited about what's going to come out of these activities. So without further ado, I think we are pulling back in David. Yeah, David Fisher, yes.
My name is David Fisher. I enjoy the opportunity to be the board chair of Growth and Justice, and I've been involved with this, the sequence coming to this event for the last 5 years, I guess. But this is a culmination of a great deal of work on behalf of a great staff at Growth and Justice. Jane Leonard, Dane Smith, Matt Byrne, Sarah Listicle, Kate Searles, Monica Schwartz, Katie Jetalo, and Elliot Muller. All have been on staff doing this for the last year, and particularly the last 6 months or so. So they have made this happen. It's a small staff with a heavyweight punch. And I also commend oneminnesota.org and our statewide Thriving by Design network for bringing this initiative forward. We have a lot of work to do. This is kind of like coming out of the gate to a new type of campaign going forward, to bringing this out and then bringing this out and getting it in front of policymakers. At Growth and Justice, we believe that when Minnesota makes smart investments in practical solutions, it leads to broader prosperity for everyone, and that means, in our parlance, a rising tide lifts all boats. The mission of Growth and Justice, approved by our board of directors, is to develop and advocate for public policy that makes Minnesota's economy more prosperous and fair for all Minnesotans. That is, a one Minnesota. That's been our theme for years. This is a culmination then in this one Minnesota theme and its blueprint that of work over many, many years. We have a 20-member board of directors of distinguished Minnesotans, Democrats, Republicans, independents, people from business, labor, government, and nonprofit communities from throughout the state. And I can speak for every board member that we stand behind the One Minnesota Equity Blueprint 100% and enthusiastically. You know, we were founded over 40 years, that after 40 years of rising economic inequality in both rural and urban America, continuing median income stagnation, rising racial disparity, and job loss, not due to immigration, but due to automation and technology, that we now must look to a future where each and every Minnesotan, regardless of race or geography or gender or ability, has access to the opportunity to succeed and share in that success. So we are welcoming you to please get the word out about our equity blueprint. Help us find the policymakers who will make this happen in reality throughout the state for all Minnesotans. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I just want to say that as I'm Lois Porter and a member of the board and was also very much involved in the process. And I just want to say that I was thrilled with the diversity of participation, the civic participation. This is a time when so many people are jaded and have given up on government. But I was able to observe citizens coming together, making their voices heard, sometimes wrangling and debating over which policies we should keynote. But in the end, we were able to come up with a plan, and to see citizens excited and engaged in the process just really did me a world of good. So I encourage you to watch the process as it continues to unfold and see what we come up with. Thank you.
Yeah. Hi everyone, I'm Sarah Listicle. I'm the Policy and Outreach Manager at Growth and Justice. And Growth and Justice and onemn.org have been working together throughout the last year to organize the Thriving by Design Network. We've been collaborating with delegates and community leaders across the state to hold community conversations in different local communities. And these were all related to the priorities at hand. And over this past 6 months, Minnesotans have generated over 600 recommendations. And these are the foundation of what we're here to share with you today. I'm happy to introduce Kimberly Nagel. She's one of our delegates who has been deeply engaged throughout the process. And she is also the owner and entrepreneur of Upgrow Business International in Bemidji, Minnesota. So I will hand it over to Kimberly.
Good afternoon. Or I think it's still morning, even though I left my house in south of Bemidji at 4 o'clock in the morning. It was the shortest drive I have ever taken. Okay? And it was shortened by the fact that these people saw fit to look at one Minnesota. It bridged the gap between the capital and Bemidji, just like that. Because they came to, we developed the community meetings where voices from Bemidji, voices from Marshall, Minnesota, voices across the state were heard. And they were heard in a respectful manner, not in the manner of, we're complaining, we have problems, we're poor little lambs, but in terms of solution. And I think that is what drew me to Thriving by Design. This is about creating solutions. And as an entrepreneur, I don't see problems. I see opportunities. I see things that we have yet to accomplish. And we live in this state that was born of entrepreneurs. Just north of me, Articat, all of the too numerous to mention, these were businesses that were born in someone's garage. And we need to find ways to support those, not just by creating a loan fund, but by creating opportunity and an understanding that truly the distance between north, south, east, west to this capital is as short as we want to make it. So I thank Jane and everyone for including me not only in the whole process, and many other entrepreneurs, many other careful thinkers. I just thank you for including us in this process and getting this process off the ground. And it is just off the ground. It is just starting. So thank you.
I'm Dane Smith, Senior Policy Fellow at Growth and Justice and former President. I'm going to get to some of the meat of the priorities that you have in front of you. And I just want to make a couple points about the emphasis in these priorities on human potential, sometimes called human capital, a strong emphasis on climate action, and an alignment with business leadership in the state on many of these priorities. Folks from all over Minnesota who participated in the process really reaffirmed the work Growth and Justice has been doing for years that stresses the importance of developing human potential more equitably through education policies primarily. This means much more attention before K and after 12. You'll see a lot of that in the priorities. A lot of emphasis on early childhood development and much more attention to after high school in career pathways, apprenticeships, new and better ways of attaining post-secondary credentials and skills, and pushing with all the vigor we can muster to make that work for all people of all color, people of all regions. And when we go to St. Cloud, right after this, we will highlight a local community partnership. Not everything that we need to do has to happen in state government or the federal government. It has to come from underneath. And we are seeing this, we're going to draw attention to these community efforts the best we can. Greater Minnesota Education Partnerships are up and running, like the one that we're going to highlight in St. Cloud. They're in Austin, Northfield, Red Wing, Rochester, and they're officially allied now with inner city efforts, the Northside Achievement Zone and the St. Paul Promise neighborhood. They learn from each other. That's the kind of future we need for Minnesota. On climate action, there's a new emphasis at Growth and Justice. We've been aware of this for a long time. It's time to really get off the dime and merge climate action with equity. We will expand in the larger One Minnesota Equity Blueprint on the many ways we can pursue renewables, decarbonization, protection of our sacred waters too, and integrate all of this with the idea of economic, racial, and regional equity. It's important, finally, to note that business leadership in Minnesota is strongly behind the renewable effort, and there is now even a Minnesota Conservative Energy Forum. These are conservatives who agree that it makes sense economically now for Minnesota to pursue renewable energy with haste. We do have strong business leadership support in Minnesota now for many elements in these priorities, but particularly these three. Strong support for infrastructure and major new funding for transportation and mass transit. You'll see that a lot of emphasis on infrastructure and mass transit. Business community is saying that's imperative for metro growth, but also rural mobility. Fostering the growth of renewable energy is the second major theme that business is strong alignment with. And welcoming immigrants is the third and very important element. The Minnesota Chamber of Commerce has actually done a lot of work about how to encourage more immigrants and creating pathways to legal status for all our hardworking, undocumented Minnesotans. And among the groups we have found most valuable in this project is the Minnesota Association of Development Organizations. These are the people on the ground actually overseeing and helping stimulate local economic development and business growth in each of 10 Minnesota's rural communities. So I don't know if Kate wants to add on this. She was our research director, and we're just about to wrap up here and open it up.
I'm Kate Searles, and I'm the Director of Policy Research at Growth and Justice. One of the things I'd like to direct your attention to is Growth and Justice is a data-driven organization, and here's one example, which is a map that we put together of Minnesota school districts by percentage of kids who are on free and reduced lunch eligibility. This map shows that too many of Minnesota's children live in economically distressed homes. This is a one Minnesota situation. You can see that the darker the color, the more children. What's the very darkest? Is it over 75%?
It is, yes, over 75% free and reduced in these darkest areas.
So the darkest areas, which are across the state, more than half are in greater Minnesota. That shows you that 75% of the children in that school district are eligible for free and reduced lunch.
But also in Metro?
It's also in Metro, right. So what this is showing us is that despite the conventional measures of growth, we have low unemployment, we have a state GDP growth, and we have record business profits, Minnesota's prosperity is not being equitably shared. And when we were in our conversation, we heard loud and clear, we don't need any new shiny things, we need our basic needs met. We need affordable living jobs, we need transportation to get us there, we need childcare for having our children be safe while we can hold on to our jobs, and we need to be free of fear. We need to be free of police brutality, we need to be free of the fear that our elders and our children are falling through the cracks. We really are very, very grateful to all the hundreds of Minnesotans who shared their insights with us as to what was plaguing their communities, and we sure as heck saw a lot of commonalities across the state. So, Jane?
Thank you, Kate and Dane. This is really a team effort, and that's why I'm just so blessed to have all these people standing here with us. And Brett, come on in together. I think as Kimberly said too, we have so much opportunity and so much, so many. We are solutionaries. Let's say that. Okay.
Trademark that.
Trademark that, along with One Minnesota. What we'd like to do now, though, is open it up for your questions. And we do have a list of all the folks that spoke here, so you've got their contact information as well. But we want to turn it over to you all. Yes, sir.
So I see my cursory view of what's in this document. I see a lot of issues connected to folks, well, a couple of issues connected to folks that I represent and I work with, and centered around restoring the vote and criminal justice reform. What I don't see, which I'm also deeply interested in, is serious growth opportunities that's not just about criminal justice reform, but serious growth opportunities in neighborhoods that are experiencing a lot of disinvestment. So where are new investments coming in? Representation beyond just dialogue here, but representing in this place where they're elected representatives. How do we increase that growth pool and those kind of representations as well? And so another thing that I'm thinking about is also, where are we invested in real income growth and improvement for the neighborhoods and folks that I'm talking about as well, and increasing those opportunities, making real efforts and standing together in the One Minnesota, so that we see those kinds of growth, so that we can look at parity across the line.
It's a great question, Pastor Thug. Basically, what we are going to be looking at is a robust solution-based investment within key communities, such as, and especially using certain models and certain activities through the opportunity districts that are being presented right now, but now starting to look about where's the economy going and starting to develop some great entrepreneurs, start working with them, start also working with the various CDCs in the various areas, and start to create those synergies to truly come up with some solution-based activities. We could, as we've talked about before, a lot of money has been thrown at the problem instead of actually supporting the people that are there. And so our hope is that through our efforts here with others is to create those spaces that great ideas can really start to connect all the necessary pieces in order to make sure that all members of our community are truly engaged in the economy. So I'm looking forward to definitely work, and intensifying things, of course, in North Minneapolis, Rondo, and coming up with some strong solutions that, some of the residents are there, but maybe need that extra push and that extra connection. Again, we have Kevin Lindsay up here. We will always call him Commissioner Lindsay here. But coming up with the ideas that truly start to engage public and private partnerships, i.e., what we did with the light rail as well as the stadium, and really start to ensure that we're at ground zero with those new opportunities.
Any thoughts about connecting key issues around criminal justice and growth income opportunity? So I hear this marijuana thing is becoming a $1 billion industry.
Right.
Taking some of those people who have been caught up in illegal activity and creating a real opportunity for them to legalize their efforts and business and growth, and ensuring that they are leading on this front of this huge industry.
Specifically, 1MN is definitely going to take a major run at this with its partners that are already talking about the issue of legalization. Growth and Justice is a partner of the 1MN network, and we're pushing that idea to ensure that those who have been definitely harmed through the war on drugs, that they are front and center on the opportunities as they arise when legalization takes place, and we believe it will take place soon.
Just wanted to say that for Minneapolis, with its Clean Energy Fund, that's we raise money like $3-4 million a year in Minneapolis through the franchise fee, and by prioritizing weatherizing the lowest income homes, we can really try to reverse some of the disinvestment. So that's just one idea that you could plug into the Energy Vision Advisory Committee for Minneapolis on how they're working on directing those funds.
Giselle?
Jane, Fred, two questions. Google just announced that they're going to build a major facility in wind, outstate Becker, Minnesota. I see it as an ideal project for us to get involved in, and how can this strategy impact our communities and everything?
Great question.
Yeah, Isel, when I saw that, the first thing that popped into my mind was, thank heavens we put broadband there. That was one of the grants that went out from the State Broadband Development Fund. And a great company and a great community worked together to get high-speed broadband out to the industrial park in Becker and also in the neighborhoods there. So I think it shows, and I worked on that project. I was the State Broadband Grants Administrator before I came to Growth and Justice. And to me, the broadband is one of those equity investments in many ways, both for rural and urban places. And I just kept thinking the foundation's been laid there, and now things are going to take off with that Google being there. So it just shows you the kind of preparation that we need to do and need to continue to do as a state and local communities and local businesses working together to seize those opportunities.
The second part of that question is wind, farms and everything else. That's energy, and that affects many of the initiatives and everything else. How can we use that as a way to leverage and build our community because of the wind farms that's being created as a source of energy?
Right. This is where we really have to start to remind ourselves we're all interconnected across the state, that things that happen just in Becker, and again, transportation is also a major conversation to make sure that workers are able to get from core city out to ex-urban areas to be able to participate. But as we're talking about energy as well, that we have to reimagine how Minnesota needs to look in the 21st century to take away the issue of carbon take the carbon out of the air and start to use the great resources that we have. As you see with our logo even, we actually highlight the fact of the biomes and how we actually should be taking advantage and actually building a greater society from that. So that comes from Core City all the way through to Northwoods and everything else. So that would be the approach that we're going to be advocating for very strongly.
How about our rural broadband? Where does that fit into this picture?
Huge.
Yeah, it's, rural broadband, as you've seen on our legislative priorities, is a priority, and as I just mentioned with the Becker opportunity, I can't say enough about how much broadband and high-speed, high-capacity broadband unveils entrepreneurial opportunity. Maybe Kimberly can talk a little bit more about some of that, but we have so many people that are working in their homes, in their basements, as Kimberly said, starting businesses in garages. And so broadband is critical as that elemental, foundational investment. I have to call out my friend and chair, David Fisher. I worked for David a long time ago at the Department of Administration when we first started working on internet, broadband, or it wasn't even called broadband then, it was just that internet thing. Back in the 1990s. And so you can see that it's taken 20 some years to get even to this point. But the broadband to me is one of the greatest examples of urban-rural partnering that we can have. Understanding that we all need each other and we're laying that playing field.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that this question of how we integrate equity with climate action will be elaborated on at length as we flesh out the larger blueprint. We'll come up with the best examples of communities that are training underemployed youth in our communities of color and low-income families into higher tech, into these jobs that are in demand right now all over the state, and especially moving those towards renewable energy jobs. And we know that Minnesota has no fossil fuel. It is in our interest to be self-supporting, our economic interest. The wind and the sun is all out there in the greater Minnesota. The folks who need jobs are many times in Metro Core, but increasingly we're diverse throughout the state. And so lumping all these, moving these things together and integrating equity and climate action is at the very heart of it. So your question is really on point. It gets to the heart of what this blueprint's about.
Questions?
Yeah, so what's your plan for the legislative session in terms of the organizing, in terms of the lobbying? What communities are you going to be bringing to the legislature? What's that relationship going to be?
Great question. Actually, one of the things that we were just talking about, just to make sure we're all on the same page. No, seriously, we know that there are some, it's a new administration, new legislature. We want to let them, find vacuums for the first couple of weeks and figure out what's going on. I know that they're doing a great job, but we're going to let them kind of work their way through. Our position is real simple. Let's figure out where the budget priorities are going to be, figure out what's going to be really palatable over the next couple of years, figure out exactly where those key partners are going to be through this whole process, and then drive hard on one of our key issues. We know there are several things that we can drive on right after that. We know that we will, in partnership, we'd love to be able to talk about the issue of redistricting. That's a major piece as it relates to access and activity. The issue of energy. Those are things I think can be moved and actually have some movement within the legislature. But the funny thing about the legislature is they have their own will. And until, we'll get our local organizing networks going probably mid-February after the priorities are discussed, budget's discussed. And we'll see exactly what has that great momentum at that point and then drive like nobody's business.
Can you speak a little bit more about the timeline that you keep mentioning? It sounds like it's several years long.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, the legislative priorities that you have before you today are for the legislative biennium of 2019-2020. Obviously, things can change along the way. However, we do look at the full blueprint, which will be rolling out over the next couple of weeks, if not a couple of months, because we've got a lot in this. We see it truly as this 10-year vision. We know that, maybe that becomes 5, I don't know, time moves pretty quickly, I'm not getting any younger.
We'll have the full blueprint done by the middle of this session.
Yeah.
But we see it as a guide for the next decade.
And the reason why we're going about it this way is that the issue of equity and really trying to bring everybody together in the state of Minnesota, it's not going to be done overnight. It's going to take some time. It's going to take really conversations. And we'll have the guide, but basically what it is allowing our local organizing networks to really start to have deeper conversations with their neighbor and start to understand their role in this responsibility. We're here for the long haul, because quite honestly, it's in our best interest to be inclusive in the development of this idea and really reimagine what Minnesota needs to be. The reality is that we can't have 20th century solutions for the things that we're about to take on. And it's going to take 10 years. It's going to take a little longer than that. But our job is to create this foundation with these ideas, to start to use our networks that has been developing across the board. You see the neighbors that will be working from there, and really start to just be as consistent and concise and open to new ideas. Again, we had 700 ideas. It was like closer to 700 ideas in just a couple months. So just imagine when we really start to have a robust conversation from there, and what it's going to take in order to triage from that standpoint.
I think we'll have to wrap it up. I see the next folks coming in here. We want to encourage you to contact each of us, all of us. I think you have some contacts for some of the folks behind here who have spoken. And if you look at the actual policy priorities, you'll see hyperlinks. If you look at the online version, and you can see all the organizations that have informed this work. There's a lot of them. I'd say more than 2 or 3 dozen that are linked there for data and information. Not all these organizations necessarily endorse the entire set of priorities, but all of them have helped inform it, and we have drawn useful information and support from them. Many of these organizations will be pushing elements of this set of priorities, and thanks again for coming, and we're off to St. Cloud.